And then Max Stassi actually crushes lefties too. Got to mention him. 2.5, that's a pretty nice play. I definitely like Stassi there.
And that is drilled out toward left center field. Kyle Lewis going to watch this one go. Big fly for Max Stassi. 1-0 Angels.
Max continues to entertain us with the long ball this year. 3 home runs for Max Stassi.
Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm back to break down this 5-game slate on Fanduel and Draftkings. If you tuned into yesterday's video, you know I'm doing a giveaway this week. You can enter a contest to be the winner of a free KJK DFS t-shirt. All you have to do is leave a comment below of your favorite pick tonight to hit a home run, and then go ahead and follow me over on Twitter at KJK_DFS, and I'll be picking a winner on Friday for that free t-shirt. Before I get into it, go ahead, like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you like this content. You'll be tuning in for future videos. And then, as I had mentioned, you can go ahead and follow me over on Twitter at KJK_DFS. And lastly, if you're interested in my Patreon package, I do have a new MLB package launched over there with a bunch of good stuff. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested. And with that being said, let's start breaking down the slate today. So we do have a smaller slate. Slates like these, game theory becomes more relevant. And game theory meaning if you're playing in tournaments, you're going to have to keep an eye on things like ownership. So we're going to want to break down, who's in the best spots and that stuff. But then we're also going to want to look at some plays that might be lower owned and, sneaky good. So as always, I like to start my breakdown with sorting my sheet by K percentage. It's fantasy sports. We get points for strikeouts. And the first guy that sticks out on my sheet today is that in Freddie Peralta. Freddie's a young kid that's got a high K rate, and he does have some hard contact problems, mainly in the fly ball and the ground ball category. He gives up a lot of fly balls, and then the hard contact's also orange. So he's a high strikeout, high hard contact pitcher. There's a lot of those in the league nowadays. They either strike guys out or they give up home runs. But for fantasy sports, we can live with that as long as we're getting our strikeouts. And, Freddie's got a 29.7% clip against right-handed hitters. And then scrolling further along, he's got a 30% clip against lefties. And when looking at his matchup today, he gets to take on the Chicago White Sox, who do have a 4.77 implied team total, but there's a lot of strikeouts in this lineup. I mean, they do have Luis Robert at the top of the lineup, the new young prospect who's absolutely killing it. But, as I mentioned, the strikeouts are there. So good hitters, but strikeouts, they got the power, so you could get yourself in trouble. But it's a short slate, and Freddie Peralta comes in at a 5.9 price tag on Fanduel, which is very reasonable. So you could definitely have interest in Freddie. First guy that stands out as far as strikeout upside. And second on the list, you got Zach Gallen, who's taking on a Houston Astros team, which isn't one we really want to target, but as I had mentioned, it's a smaller slate. So playing a guy that's not in an ideal spot might be a good way to differentiate yourself. So, you got Zach Gallen taking on the Houston Astros. People are going to look at and see the Astros and not want to target them. And when looking at his numbers, he's got the strikeout percentage. We're dealing with a 90 innings pitch sample size. He's got the 29.4% K rate. He's got pretty decent numbers across the board. I mean, the ground ball rate and the walk rate aren't the greatest. But splits-wise, he has a 29.8 against righties. And then he's got a 29% against lefties. So he's pretty consistent across the board for his strikeout rate. And while this isn't a lineup that strikes out the most, we do have limited options as far as pitching. And, he comes in second of the slate at a K percentage, so he's another guy to factor into your lineups. You got Brandon Bielek, I believe is how you pronounce it, who's going to, I believe he's just going to open for the Astros, so he'll go out there and throw a couple innings. It's going to be a bullpen game. If I find that that's incorrect, I'll go ahead and tweet out to you guys. But, he's just an opener. I don't think they're going to push him more than 2 innings type of deal. So they're going to be bringing in their bullpen, and their bullpen's pretty good. So, keep that in mind. That's more on the hitting end for the Diamondback side, but it's looking like a bullpen game for the Astros. And then, other guys we can target. It really, there's not a lot of elite pitching, but we have matchups. I mentioned not a lot of elite pitching. Nate Pearson is a top prospect for the Toronto Blue Jays, young kid that just came up, and he's supposed to be, the real deal. So we're dealing with 5 innings pitched sample size here on Pearson. So not really much to work off other than the fact that, he's a top prospect, and I think he's a guy that I would definitely have interested on the slate, just being that we have limited options. He comes in at a 7.5 price tag on Fanduel. So he's in the mid-range, and he's taking on a Atlanta Braves team who isn't an ideal target. But when we're breaking down pitching on this slate, I feel as if, he's, top 3 in talent. So, you got Zach Gallen, you got Tyler Chatwood, and then you got Pearson. So that automatically makes him a candidate to play today. And on a small site like this, there could be a lot of hype around him because he's a top prospect, but there could also be not a lot of awareness of who he is, and maybe you'll get him at a low ownership. And, I'm going to go ahead and endorse him today on a slate like this, a young kid who's supposed to have a lot of promise, and, you don't have a lot of top-tier options. This is a perfect spot to just go ahead and roll him out there. And he's in the mid-price range, so like him. And then, we have probably the next 3 guys to pick from here. You got Yamamoto, who has not very good numbers, but he's taking on a Baltimore team that strikes out a lot. But then he's got the hard contact, the ground ball, the fly ball, the walk, and the hard hit rate aren't great either. So I'm also going to have interest in the bats. We'll get to that. But he's got a 24% K rate against righties, and he's got a 25 against lefties. So not a lot of, it seems like a lot of consistency in these pitchers. We're not dealing with a lot of matchup dependent guys. There's not a lot of splits heavy pitchers. So we just want to target the guys with the highest K rates in the best matchups. And Yamamoto's in a good matchup, taking on Baltimore, where, when looking at their lineup, the strikeouts are definitely there. You look up and down, ton of strikeouts. I mean, you have a few guys in there. Iglesias doesn't strike out. Austin Hayes, but I really, pretty much all these guys strike out a ton. You're reaching to say they don't. But you got one solid low K rate guy in there in Iglesias. So yeah, just an overall good matchup. He's 5'7". You're gonna have to take what you can get on this slate. Not a lot to choose from. Another option, and then the next 2 guys, you got Touki Toussaint here, who's got a 24.9% K rate, but Tuki's got a big walk problem, so that can get him in trouble. 14.4%, and then he's got a 28% K rate against righties, and it drops down to 20 against lefties. So we refer him against right-handed heavy lineups. And he's taking on the Toronto Blue Jays today, who are pretty right-handed heavy. It looks like, they're going to try to throw in some lefties that don't usually start to try to combat with the splits. But even their lefties strike out a ton. You got Rowdy Tellez at the bottom. He strikes out a ton. He's got a ton of power, but he strikes out a ton. Same with Travis Shaw. And then same with Kevon Biggio. All guys that strike out a lot. And the last guy I want to mention is that in Tyler Chatwood taking on the Kansas City Royals. Chatwood is the most expensive pitcher on the slate, coming in at a 9.6 price tag. And 9.6 is quite a bit to pay for Chatwood, but I think it's well deserved. 1, with the way he's been performing, and then 2, he has the best matchup on the slate by far. As far as, he's taking on a Kansas City Royals team. He's stretched out. He's going to get the pitch count up there in comparison to some of these other options we talked about. And the Kansas City Royals strike out a ton. So I already mentioned that, but it's just a good matchup. He is a 9.6, so he's a little bit on the salary dependent side, meaning, you know, we're gonna have to pay a decent amount to get him in our lineup, so we're gonna have to break down these bats we like and figure out what we're gonna do. So let's move on to the bats. When looking at the bats, I always like to look at the fly ball rate, the ground ball rate, and the hard contact. So let's go ahead and sort my sheet by the fly ball rate. And the first guy that stands out in the fly ball, ground ball category as far as targeting is that in Freddie Peralta. He's taking on the Chicago White Sox. And, you know, Freddie, we mainly want to target the lefties. You look over here at his ground ball and fly ball rate against lefties. So guys I'm going to have interest in are Yohan Moncada. I have a ton of interest in because he's a switch hitter that really excels from the left-hand side of the plate, kills right-handed pitching. So he would be my top option. I still have interest in Luis Robert at the top. He's been hot. Yasmani Grandal I like a lot, and Nomar Mazara. And then, you know, Larry Garcia in the second base spot isn't bad at all either, because at second base it doesn't always have the best options, and he's got that left-handed split advantage that we talked about, or the platoon advantage as they like to call it. And then you got Zach Collins at the bottom of the lineup, who's got a ton of power, and he's 2K. So he's kind of a diamond in the rough pick today. I actually like Zach Collins a lot at the minimum salary. And second on the list we want to target is that in Yamamoto. I had mentioned that we might want to throw him against Baltimore, but I actually have a lot of interest in the Baltimore bats. You know, we had talked about his splits. He's pretty equal across the board. There's not really one side we want to target. He's actually better against lefties in the slugging category. So, and pretty significant. So we'll go ahead and say, you know, we prefer the righties. And when looking at the Baltimore lineup, there's not really a ton of options to choose from that just stand out as far as power, but the top option is that in Renato Nunez in the 4 spot. Nunez has a ton of power, and he's that right-handed hitter that we need to match up with the splits, and he comes out at a 2.8 price tag, which is reasonable. So, you know, Nunez is my top option. My number 2 option would be that in Anthony Santander. Even though he's going to be hitting from the left side, he's got the top bat in this lineup, and he's a guy I always have interest in that I don't think he's played enough because he's on the Orioles, but he's got a good stick, and, you know, he can definitely go out there and get the job done for you in this matchup. He's top of my page with Nunez. And then Dwight Smith Jr. would be third. I really like him. And then Chance Sisco has a ton of power. And Alberto fills in that second base spot, as we had discussed already. You know, if you want to do the stack, you can throw in Iglesias there. Iglesias is probably, you know, one of my least preferred options. I like Santander. I like Nunez. I like Dwight Smith Jr. And I like Sisco. Those are my top options from the Baltimore side. So I'm going to have interest in those Baltimore bats. And then third on our list and guys to target is that in Wade LeBlanc, who's taking on Miami. And Miami might be my favorite stack on this slate, which is a little maybe contrarian because it's Miami. Not really people don't really usually have interest in targeting the Miami bats, but I like them today. I like him, and, you know, LeBlanc struggles in every single category outside of the walk and the hard hit rate. When looking at his splits, he has a 465 slugging against right-handed hitting. He's got a 17.2% K rate, so he's not striking anyone out, and he gives up a ton of hard contact. And then the lefties is where he's a little bit impressive, actually. You know, he's got the hard contact rate down to 30. Fly ball rate's still bad, ground ball rate's still bad. So you can have interest in really everyone, but mainly targeting the righties. And when looking at the righties in this lineup, ones that pique my interest. Number 1 is that in Jesus Aguilar. He's got a ton of power. Number 2 is Brian Anderson. Number 3 is Francisco Cervelli. But, you know, the 3 ons where it gets a little bit, they're kind of blended. I kind of have interest in all of them. I have, you know, Jesus and Aguilar and Brian Anderson are definitely my top 2 options. But then I would definitely have interest in John Birdie. I have interest in Logan Forsythe. I have interest in Cervelli, and I have interest in Brinson. Brinson's a guy I would go light on, though. Not a ton of interest. You know, he's probably first to fall off my list. But Cervelli, Forsythe, Brian Anderson, and Jesus Aguilar. Gotta have interest in them. And then John Birdie in the outfield at 2-1. I have a lot of interest in him, you know, because of his lineup spot and his salary. And then Jonathan Villar at the top of the lineup has that speed. Jonathan Villar is a guy who, if he gets on base, he can run. So you could be looking at some big stolen base upside with VR. So I got to point him out there. And then, our next spot for bats, I mean, the top run total on the slate is that in the Chicago Cubs. They come in with a 5.11 implied run total. Some of these lines haven't been released yet when I'm recording this, so, that could be topped. But for now, they're the top line on the day. And they're taking on Brad Keller, who, when looking at his numbers, he's pretty good he's very good in the ground ball fly ball rate, and he's very good in the hard contact rate, but he can't strike anyone out. His K rate's very bad, and his swinging strike rate is really bad. So, these balls are going to be put in play a lot, and then when looking at his splits, he struggles a lot more against lefties. Against righties, he's actually pretty impressive, across the board outside of the strikeouts, as I mentioned, but against lefties, he struggles. And, when looking at lefties, we're going to want to target. Anthony Rizzo is the premier option. Kyle Schwarber comes in second with a ton of power. Jason Hayward at the 2.2 price tag, you got to have a lot of interest in him. Victor Caratini at 2.3 has a ton of power, and then Jason Kipnis. So, I like these lefties a lot in the Chicago lineup today. So, yeah, got to have interest in those Cubby bats. And then, those are probably our top options on the slate. Being that it's such a small slate, you got to have interest in every team, really, and pick your spots to differentiate. As far as being hot, the Arizona Diamondbacks had a big night last night. If you believe in riding the hot streaks type of deal, they are a good lineup, and you could target them. It's just that if they're dealing with a bullpen game, there is the new 3-batter minimum rule, so they could be in some good matchups. But they're going to be constantly getting managed and facing bad matchups. They're going to be changing their pitchers out throughout the game to take on the likes of Marte, Calhoun, Christian Walker type of deal. They're going to put in righties to take on guys that struggle against righties and lefties that struggle against lefties. Premier matchups. So that's kind of what limits the appeal there for me as far as stacking the Diamondbacks, but it doesn't matter. You could still do it because they're a talented lineup and it's a small slate. So, don't want to contradict myself, but that's the verdict on that situation. Got to decide for yourself. And then, the Houston Astros are arguably the best lineup on the slate. So you got to have interest in them taking on Gallen. I mean, we talked about Gallen's numbers, and he's pretty impressive across the board. But at the same time, impressive. I mean, he's average against righties, and Houston has some righties that can really slug. So, George Springer, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, Ulesky Gurriel, Carlos Correa, and these guys are all underpriced. So just throw in, Springer at 3.4, Gurriel at 2.9, Correa at 3.4. I already said him, but Alex Bregman. These guys are all Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve are kind of priced appropriately. I would say Altuve is still a little underpriced, but he's up there, so keep that in mind. As far as the price tags, you could target definitely Josh Reddick. He's in a good spot. And then the last team I have to mention is that in the Atlanta Braves, who are going to take on the young prospect in Pearson, who, as I had mentioned, is very talented, but they are up there for the best lineup on the slate as well. So you could just toss them in purely on talent. So you got Acuna, Dansby Swanson, Freddie Freeman, Ozuna. That 1 through 4 is really my top priority. And to be honest with you, the bottom of the lineup I actually don't really like that much. So you could toss in a Marquez in the 5 spot, but anything outside of that going down in the bottom of the order, I'm not really wanting to target today. And yeah, so that pretty much wraps up my breakdown for today's slate. Just keep in mind it's a smaller one. Try to differentiate yourself. Play some guys that have some talent that maybe aren't in the best spot, and a guy like Zach Gallen who could go out there and have a good outing against Houston, and he might not be as highly owned as he should be. Guys I have interest in or spots I have interest in. You got to like the Cubbies with that 5.11 implied total. I like the Marlins a lot, and I like Baltimore. They're in Miami, which isn't the best hitters park, but they both have terrible bullpens, and they're both rolling out a starter that's not the greatest. So I could actually see going ahead with a game stack, just throwing in a bunch of Baltimore Orioles and just throwing in a bunch of Miami Marlins, paying up for some pitching. I like in my lineup there. I don't think that will be as popular as it should be because it's the Miami Marlins and the Baltimore Orioles. They're not appealing, good teams. And then the Chicago White Sox, mainly the lefties. I like Zach Collins a lot at 2K on Fanduel, even though he's in the 9th spot. His minimum salary, and he's got a lot of power. And we had mentioned the splits of Peralta. Like him a lot. Like Moncada the most. Love Moncada in this spot. Like Yasmani Grandal. And, just target the guys with power in the middle of the lineup. So Eloy Jimenez, Jose Abreu, and then Luis Robert at the top. He's got power and speed, so you got to like him a lot. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a smaller slate. So you got what you got, and you got to just work with what they're giving you. So if you like the content and you think you're going to tune into future videos, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified for future videos. You can enter my t-shirt giveaway contest. All you have to do is leave a comment below on your favorite hit or favorite pick to hit a home run today. And I actually forgot to mention mine yesterday. Typically a guy I really like is that in the thumbnail, so always be looking at who I throw in there. But my pick today is that in Jesus Aguilar of the Miami Marlins. I think Aguilar is going deep today. He's my home run pick. And yeah, that's what I'll sign off with today. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Good luck tonight, and have a good one.